Good morning, folks, and welcome back to Mobility Matters. I'm your host, Javier Betancourt, Executive Director of the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, or CITT. We're a quasi-independent agency of Miami-Dade County charged with overseeing your half-penny sales tax for transportation. And we're broadcasting live out of Community Newspaper Studios here in South Miami, and we want to thank them for their ongoing partnership in producing the program. So thank you, Rachel, Grant, and Michael and company. So with me today, I have a wonderful guest. So the CITT works in the transportation space with many agencies, but also a number of nonprofits, and none more so than Transit Alliance Miami. And the Executive Director of Transit Alliance is here with us today, Cathy Dos Santos. Cathy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Javier.
Sure, no. And so what is Transit Alliance?
Well, thank you for asking. Transit Alliance is a nonprofit that dedicates itself to advocating for walkable streets, bikeable neighborhoods, and accessible public transit for all of Miami-Dade. We also have some campaigns that are statewide, some that are regional, but essentially our aim really is to engage our community around matters of mobility and make sure that our elected officials, our planning agencies are taking into account their voices and their thinking and best practices for our community in their actions.
How'd the organization come to be? It hasn't been around for a terribly long time, but
no, it has not. We are, I believe, next year we're going to be 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, 10 in the grand scheme of things is not that long, but time really does fly. So I feel like, it's my time with the organization always has only been about a little bit over a year, but we came to be founded in 2015. And since 2015, we've been doing advocacy around different areas of mobility. One of our biggest early wins was in 2018 in terms of restoring money to the budget for transportation. Right. So we prevented cuts being made, massive cuts to the DTPW budget that really allowed for our transit system to continue running. And that really also laid the ground for continuing to engage the public in understanding how their transit could be improved. Back in 2018, if folks can remember, our fleets were really in disarray. Oh, yes. The buses weren't showing up on time, trains weren't showing up on time, things were breaking down. It was really on the cusp and really was coming from years of disinvestment in transit. And with the Stops the Cuts campaign, we were able to really remind our elected officials that folks in Miami-Dade do want transit, that they need and they want investments to be made in it, and that if we do so, we will see increased ridership because then people can rely on it. And, fast forward and a whole lot of many community conversations, many going out to transit stops and talking to folks, we came up with the idea that we needed to rethink how our bus network specifically, which carries the majority of our transit riders.
It's the workhorse of the transit system.
Yes, it really is. Yeah. And I believe it's something like 7 out of 10 transit riders are riding the bus. Yep. And many of them, if they are daily riders, they're at some point on the bus. We came up with the idea that we needed to redesign this network because for almost 40 years, the network was added to, taken from, reshaped in a way since 1986 when the last redesign was done that wasn't really catering to the needs and of our community members today. It wasn't going where people needed to go, where they live. Miami-Dade has changed enormously in almost 40 years. So that's where the Better Bus Project was born, which later became now became the Better Bus Network. And it really was, finding how we could take community members' thoughts, opinions, knowledge about their own communities and their own needs as transit riders and transform them into a bus network that made sense for them. And bringing together also all the experts because, and something we can get into is that we, Transit Alliance, we are not transit planners. We are urbanists by heart, but most of us are really coming from a professional experience of bringing in our community into different spaces. Like myself, community engagement has been what I've been doing for, 5 years now. But it really is bringing, our our knowledge from the underground outreach that we do, and that is completely directly informed by our community members, bringing in the experts, bringing in the transit agency, and seeing how all that could become something new. And with the Better Bus Network, that a lot of people know and probably have written now, that was implemented in last November. We have been seeing growing ridership. We have been seeing a lot of conversations happening around transit, and there's still things that need to be addressed and things that need to be tweaked.
Sure.
Change is hard,
yeah,
and it takes some time, but people are speaking up, people are sharing their voices, and I do think that we're also seeing a bit more attention from our transit planners in terms of bringing and listening to our community members' voices.
Right. And I have to applaud your organization and you personally, because and I now know why you're so good at community engagement, because you all have that background. Because really, your organization does it as well, if not better, than any other organization I've seen. And it's because what you do for a living. So now, yeah, it's all clear now to me.
Well, I appreciate it. I do have to say, community engagement, I think it's work that can always be improved. Sure. And in my previous job, I worked with a lot of different nonprofits, and oftentimes something that we spoke internally is like, unfortunately, and this is both from the private sector and the public sector, if time is tight, if money is tight, oftentimes community engagement is the first thing that suffers. So that's why, to me, it's so important to dedicate all the resources, all the experience that can be done, because it's also the trickiest thing. Our community is so diverse. Right. It is so far geographically wide. It's the ways that you're going to reach folks in Little Haiti is going to be very different from how you're going to reach folks in Kendall, from South Dade. Sure. Like it really depends, and a lot of it sometimes is trial and error, because oftentimes there's not plans for these things. We talk about best practices, and when it comes to transportation planning, you can find tons of stuff on that on the internet. You can talk to experts, and it's very simple. But to a degree, us and all the wonderful community organizations that are doing work in the different areas in Miami-Dade we are the experts. So wherever we can lend those voices, we are always more than happy to support those efforts. That's
great. And you referenced very briefly kind of to a previous job. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background, education, professionally, and how did that kind of bring you to Transit Alliance?
Yeah. So I was, like many Miamians, I was not born in Miami. I was born in Venezuela, in a little island off the coast, Margarita. For all my Venezuelans that may be watching, you're probably like, oh my God, I loved going to Margarita. Yes, I know.
I like drinking them, place. But that's
funnily enough, they weren't that popular there, but it definitely fits. So I moved to the United States with my parents back in 2010. I was 13 years old. Both of my parents, however, are Portuguese. So I grew up traveling a lot especially from Venezuela to Portugal to visit family. And really, Europe was the first introduction for me to a transit system. In Venezuela, at least in the island where I was from, we had some buses, but it was almost completely car dependent. At least we were. And I really only experienced our small transit system when my parents would travel, and I would go with my nanny to do the errands, because she didn't know how to drive. Sure. And the stark difference for me was very clear in terms of like all the things that you can do in a day when you had a train or a bus that would show up on time and that you knew where it was going. And then coming to the U.S. to Miami, we first lived really like in South Dade, in near Homestead, and then a few years later we moved closer to the FIU area. So I didn't really experience a whole lot of the Miami-Dade transit. Right.
All very suburban.
Yes.
Out there.
Yes. Yeah. And for my parents, it was the transition that they were looking for. But for me, to a degree, I was always like a little, I hate to say this because I have so much love for Miami now, but it was like, I am so isolated.
Yeah.
You know, I was a kid in middle school and high school, depending on my parents to take me everywhere. And I actually wasn't so used to that in the island where I was from, because everything was really close.
Right.
Even if we didn't have public transportation, you could walk. You could, you know, after school, everything was really quick. And then I moved here, and everything was so far, at least to me, as a child. You know, 30 minutes each way. And then I went off to college, went to the University of Florida, and honestly, that's where I really started using the transportation system daily. I've never been someone who enjoyed driving. I did not do a whole lot of it when I was in high school. And when I went to college, it was like, you know, there was a bus right by where I lived. I took it to class every day. It had its ups and downs, but it took me where I needed to go. And it was free, so that was lovely as a student. Came back to Miami. I graduated in 2020. Fun time to be graduating, and came back to Miami, and I started working in what was hiring at the time, a local election. And I had already done some community outreach work in college. I had worked for the supervisor of elections office. I've always been someone who loves talking to people. So in my spare time with the community organizations on campus, all that, I unknowingly was doing community outreach and community engagement. So I came back and I was like, well, that is a transferable skill. And, you know, the candidates are hiring right now. So I'm going to do that for a little bit, thinking that, you know, I was going to, the pandemic was going to get better, and I was going to get a job, not in Miami, because my background was actually in international studies with a focus on the Middle East and women and gender studies. So I thought I was going to go either do work in research or in maybe go back to academia and get a master's or a higher degree. And, you know, they really, Miami got its grasp on me, because it was truly the canvassing around our neighborhoods, and I was in the West Aid sort of like sector for that particular campaign, knocking on doors in Doral, in Hialeah Gardens, in Kendall.
In a way, by the way, you were practicing international relations, because it's Miami, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm an IR major as well, and I said, you know, I practice it every day in Miami.
Absolutely. I mean, what a place to. What truly, like when we talk about the northmost capital of Latin America, we're there. And I started, you know, meeting people from different areas of Miami and thinking, you know, there's community here. There's people who are proud about where they're from, and I've always loved that about a place. I've always felt that about where I was originally from in Margarita, and I had never shaped that identity for myself in Miami until then. I think that was really the catalyst. And I mean, if you don't love the people of a place, then that's the heart of it.
You're in the wrong place.
Exactly. You got to find where your people are.
Right.
And that work led to doing more community engagement work that, you know, it changed a little bit. I worked doing outreach to small businesses after that. Then I started working more with the nonprofits and building community outreach programs with that. One of my dearest memories was working with a A La Para collaborative CDC to build their youth engagement sort of program that I believe they're still implementing. They are probably in one of their like 6th or 7th cohort now, taking young kids from the community ages 25 and like between 16 to 25 to build their own community projects, to learn about their community, to learn how things work in terms of local politics, and to choose how they want to take action within, you know, the set of the time of the program. And really what brought me to Transit Alliance was that experience building community outreach and building these relations between organizations and the public. And my reality as a transit rider. I came back to Miami. I was still living out west with my parents. Like many young people had to, move back in with family after during the pandemic, and still do. And I didn't have a car. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to stay here. I don't want to saddle myself with a car payment. Also, I hate driving. So I was like, let me figure this out.
And driving in Miami in particular, right?
Exactly. And I was like, let me figure this out. So I started taking transit. A lot of my work would start in downtown, and then I would go to different areas in the county. And that was like the easiest connection to make. So I was, one of those early people riding the 836 Express from Dolphin to downtown. And that was a start. And I have to say, I much better like some of my routes today, but I'm biased. And, I grew professionally, I grew career-wise. I was able to move out, and I continue to be a transit rider. I mean, transit in Miami completely shaped where I chose to live, and that I recognize is it's a enormous privilege for me to be able to have that choice. Because Lord knows that affordability in Miami in terms of rent right now, it's not leaving folks a lot of choice. But that's also why I believe so fervently in the work that I do, because I think that if we grow our transit, if we invest in it, if we make it accessible to more folks, that can really lead to improve the affordability for our community.
Yeah, I mean, mobility, how you get around is generally your second largest expenses after housing. So if you can lower that, that frees up some funds that you can then apply towards housing, right?
Absolutely. And, truly the pinnacle of that theory is then also making sure that we're having affordable housing coupled with transit. And we have done really great work with our friends at Miami Homes for All to inform policy in that area and to work with respected agencies on those issues. But yeah, that riding transit and all my personal frustrations with the system, but also the elation of not having to be paying $200, $300, $400. I don't even know how much a car payment is now, and I don't want to ask. I know, I figured. But plus, all insurance, parking, all that stuff. That's really what had me interested in being more present in the transit space. And when the opportunity came to come work for Transit Alliance, I knew that this is what I needed to be doing.
Yeah, and it's been a great fit. I think you're a wonderful
I like to think so too.
Representative of the organization, and you're always on brand, I have to say. I mean, I've never not seen you in orange.
I went, I went to UF for 4 years, and for 4 years I resisted buying orange as much as possible. I was one of those, mainly blue students, and here I am now fully embracing the orange. And I think it's because I needed the Miami sun. With a little bit tanner, it looks good.
We like color down here.
Yeah,
it's a vibrant community. So you talked about some of the things that Transit Alliance has done. Better bus network, of course, being one of the pinnacle of your accomplishments. What are you doing now as an organization? What are kind of the major projects that you're working on now and into the future?
Yeah. So, first, I think we have to turn to the system at large. This is not to say that our work around bus engagement is done. It has to continue because it continues to be the backbone of our transit system. But we are really looking at things like this year's budget and thinking about the next one, because everybody in politics and in local office in the country really will tell you that most likely the purse strings may be getting tight in the coming years, and we really have to make sure that transit continues to be well funded, if not more so, because there's still so much more that we want to do, especially around these capital projects that if we have to talk about the straw ballot measure that just passed, that to us is a huge win, because for years we have to be continuously making the argument and making the case for, yes, Miami-Dade residents, Miami-Dade transit riders want better transit, and they want it in their communities. And
not just riders, but the community overall sees the value, right? 80% of the people voted to support that.
Absolutely. And I think it's especially important to call it out that in communities where there are elected officials, and I'm looking at you, Miami Beach, and I say this as a resident, their community members want transit despite whatever the commissioners may be voting for or saying. And, you know, these projects have been in the planning phase for so long, and it's really time to start. Yes. I mean, when you look at, you know, we know that the initial plan for the Metro Rail included an extension to the beach. Sure. And that's just one example. I do think it's one of the more dire ones, and it's also one of the easiest cases to make because we see the ridership already. Yeah. Those buses, the 100, especially the 20, these buses have really high ridership, and these folks need solutions to get out of traffic. And it's also going to help our economies in terms of bringing more tourists, which is very much what drives the economy of South Beach. Sure. And the rest of Miami Beach, really. And for all the Miami Beach residents that are complaining that they're stuck in traffic and that, you know, what can be done about it? It's like, hey, we need to reduce the cars on the road. And these types of projects really are gonna be what does it, because it provides, you know, every car in front of you, even if you're not willing to make the choice to leave your car behind, the people around you may. Right. And that's every single person on that train is one less car in front of you.
And by the way, the person that teaches your kids, the person that maybe cleans your home.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, takes care of your children when you're working. I mean, these are folks who, by and large, many of them depend on transit.
And they drive our communities.
It's not a great way of getting to the beach. So,
they drive our economies. I mean, like all this work is like, if we didn't learn this from the pandemic, I'm gonna keep on saying it, but our service workers, our educators, everybody who is most dependent on transit is the backbone of our communities, of our economies. And, you know, that's why we really have to be looking at how we're spending our money and that we're doing it wisely. And we also need to be addressing the concerns from our public that, okay, yes, we voted for this measure and we're so excited to have more transit. We want it. We need it. But why is it not there yet? I think that's a lot of people's next question. And I think a lot of understanding has to come from, you know, how our half penny tax has performed so far and what needs it has addressed and what haven't we been able to do with it, and really get to the why and how do we fix that?
Right. How do we move forward?
Exactly. How do we ensure that we're not just repeating history? Like, yes, we want transit, and then 2002 to 2024, we only see one expansion happen. That's what we want to avoid. So
we agree.
I know CITT does. So that's, you know, this is something that's in development, and we definitely want to bring in the community members forward. And I think folks should stay tuned in. And if they don't stay tuned in, Lord knows that we're going to be out there getting them to turn their ear to these issues and to participate and activate in addressing them. But also most... in the more near future, in the immediate future, we also have to be addressing things like heat and our experience on transit actively. We're at the peak of summer. It is extremely hot outside. And this is something that, you know, has been plaguing us for the history of Miami-Dade, really, but it's only going to get worse.
Right.
And once again, our transit riders are left most vulnerable. And it's not even our transit riders. It's folks who are just walking from a garage to your job. You may be experiencing extreme heat. You may be out with your kids at a park and you don't feel safe anymore because it's so hot. And it really, you know, puts our most vulnerable community members at risk. And to us, really, the solution has always been an improved tree canopy. And you may be like, well, transit, why are you also talking about like resiliency and urban tree canopy? Well, I know you're not going to ask me that, but for the public at large, these things are intrinsically tied. Yeah. Better mobility is better for our environment, and it's better for our community's health. And it brings people outside. It makes people be more active. But also for those that don't have a choice, that have to take transit, we want to make sure that they're safe. So that leads me to work that we have been addressing for a long time developing and finding the right way to do it, because you would be surprised to know how difficult it is to just plant some trees on the sidewalk. That's really where the bureaucracy shines in how hard that can be. And there's many reasons to that I could get into, but let's just say that, you know, who owns the road, who operates it, who manages a transit stop, all these things differ a little bit. And who plants the tree, that also differs a little bit, and it creates some complication. But essentially, we do want to hear from our community members as to, you know, how their transit stops can be improved. Because shade is one thing, but perhaps there's more facilities that are needed. So we worked with the Office of Resilience, specifically the Chief Heat Officer, Jane Gilbert, to develop a plan to see how we can better understand from our transit users how to improve bus stops in their area. So we developed this tool called the Cool Commutes, and folks can find it by going to coolcommute.miami. But most importantly, they will be able to find
commute,
it. Cool
singular,
Commute.
not plural, right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Very important. Drop the S. Cool Commute. Miami. No .com .miami. And they will be able to see them in along the Route 32 very soon. There will be these decals deployed at the bus the little lollipops that, you know, tells them their bus information, and folks can scan the QR code or go to that website and directly tell their Miami-Dade County government what they would like to see at the bus stop. And they're starting on Route 32 because Jane has also been doing some work engaging folks in other areas, in other routes that go through Brownsville. And we're focusing in Brownsville because it has a really high ridership and some of the lowest urban tree canopy in our county. Truly the experience walking around to your transit stop or even biking in Brownsville can be absolutely detrimental to folks' health. And we also have to acknowledge, you know, the history of why that community doesn't have any tree canopy or any street treatments that improve the experience of heat. And it really is because of redlining, because it is a historically Black and brown community, and because it is historically low income, and we haven't provided it the right resources and the love that it deserves, and that their community members have been really clamoring for. So that's essentially trying out. It's not a new way of community engagement for us, but it's a little bit different. We usually couple it with in-person community engagement at transit stops. And actually that did go into informing this tool and creating it and understanding if people would understand how to use it and be comfortable using it. But it allows us to deploy all at once and start capturing that data. And then as the information comes along, then we can adapt. But I'm very excited to see the attention by the Office of Resilience be put on that neighborhood, on our transit riders, and I think a lot more communities would want to see something like that if this is indeed successful.
So one of the things that I think about when I think Transit Alliance, and I say this because you just referenced it, is community engagement, really good branding and marketing, but then also the data, right? And you are really data-driven organization. It's what fed Better Bus Network. It's what's feeding this program. Why is data so important?
Data is so important because if you don't know what is out there, if you don't know where people are going and how they're moving and how transit systems are performing, then you're going in completely blind. It really fills in that periphery, and it also helps us understand what we don't know, what our transit planning agencies don't know, what community members don't have information about. And it helps shape our outreach in terms of like, okay, are we asking the right questions? If we don't have this piece of data, what could we not be understanding? And especially when it comes to accountability of government, it's key, because the storytelling is an incredibly important part, but you also need to be making the case for strategies that we know are going to be successful. So if we know that, and this really went into a lot of the Better Bus Network, if we know that we have buses that, previous lines that only had about 10 riders daily, 17 riders daily, I saw even, I believe, some as low as 6, that is completely prime real estate for a commissioner to look at that and say, why are we funding transit? It's barely moving any people. And I think
that... the cost is the same for that bus and that driver, whether you're moving 6 or 60.
Exactly. And not to say that public transit has to, be a system that from fares we're able to make money. That's not a reality. It is a public benefit. But that's an indicator that line is probably not serving the perhaps the right part of the neighborhood. Maybe there's adjustments that can be made. Maybe there's a supplemental service that can be provided there that's a little bit different that would drive more people. But it's critical in terms of understanding the background. And again, finding those gaps is crucial in learning how we want to engage our community and what they can tell us that the data doesn't show yet.
Yeah. So Cathy, I have like another 20 questions for you. We'll have to do this. We'll have to do this again.
Are so long.
No, it's okay. But in the few seconds we have left, unfortunately we're out of time. How can people learn more about Transit Alliance and become involved?
Thank you for asking that. Right. So if folks want to, learn more about us, my first recommendation is absolutely go to our website, transitalliance.miami. Follow us on any of the socials that you like to consume: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. It's Transit MIA. And I really invite people to come to our community events. It's really shaping community and forming community is crucial to doing this work because there's a lot of frustration, but there can also be a lot of hope. And if folks really, really want to get involved, then we encourage them to become our Patreon subscribers. It's a small subscription that starts at $2.25 and goes all the way to the cost of a monthly pass of transit, which is $112.50 on a monthly basis. And it really helps us remain independent and very active in our community and in doing this work. So that's how people can, remain in touch.
Wonderful. And so, Cathy, I want to thank you for being a guest on the program. But more importantly, I want to thank you for what you do and for what Transit Alliance does. It takes a whole village, as they say. And you have government, the public sector, you have the private sector, but equally important is that nonprofit sector partner. And particularly when it comes to transit, we really need that advocacy, front and center, because there are competing interests. And without the community demanding things, whether it be, more funding or better service, other things sometimes take priority. So, what you do is critical, and I thank you for your work.
Thank you. And thank you for this platform to share what we do.
No, anytime. And we will definitely have you back because, again, I didn't get to half of my questions, so we'll get to them next time. Folks, that's all the time we have here on Mobility Matters. We want to invite you to join us here every other Thursday from 9 to 10 a.m. to discuss mobility, transportation, and everything under the sun related to it. Thank you again to community newspapers for hosting us here in their studios and producing the program. Take care.